In this episode, we are going to spend time with a subject that can sound administrative at first, but becomes very practical once you connect it to real business decisions. And that subject is evaluating a data governance program, DGP. New learners sometimes assume data governance is just about keeping records neat or creating rules that nobody reads, but it is much more important than that. Every organization depends on data to make decisions, serve customers, manage risk, measure performance, comply with laws, and keep operations moving. So the way data is governed has a direct effect on whether the business is reliable and trusted. When auditors evaluate a DGP, they are asking whether the organization treats data as something important enough to manage deliberately rather than as a byproduct that simply accumulates inside systems. If governance is weak, information becomes inconsistent, hard to trust, poorly protected, and difficult to use. If governance is strong, the organization is in a much better position to use data confidently, protect it responsibly, and support the business with fewer surprises. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to begin is with a plain definition of data governance itself. Data governance is the set of roles, rules, processes, decisions, and oversight practices that help an organization make sure its data is accurate enough, protected enough, available enough, and managed consistently enough to support business needs. It is not the same thing as ordinary technical maintenance, and it is not simply database administration. Technical teams may store, back up, or transmit data, but governance is about deciding how data should be defined, who is accountable for it, how quality is maintained, who may use it, how long it should be kept, and how the organization resolves disagreements about meaning or ownership. That distinction matters because data problems are often treated as technical problems when they are really governance problems underneath. A report may be wrong not because the system failed, but because no one agreed on what the reported term meant. A sensitive file may be exposed not because encryption failed, but because the organization never governed who should have had access in the first place. One reason this topic matters so much is that organizations often assume they understand their data better than they actually do. A company may have many systems, many departments, and many reports that appear to function normally, yet the same customer, product, employee, or financial information may be defined differently in different places. One team may treat a field as optional while another depends on it for reporting. A manager may trust a dashboard without realizing that the source data comes from manual spreadsheets, local workarounds, or inconsistent business rules. In that kind of environment, the business may still operate, but it does so with hidden friction and hidden risk. Auditors care because poor data governance can affect decision-making, compliance, operations, privacy, security, and financial reporting all at once. A weak DGP does not always announce itself dramatically. Often it shows up through recurring confusion, reconciliation effort, repeated errors, and long debates over which report is correct when leadership needs fast and reliable answers. A strong DGP usually begins with accountability because data rarely governs itself well when everyone touches it, but nobody truly owns it. An organization needs to know who is responsible for important data elements, who defines them, who approves changes, who monitors quality concerns, and who decides how data should be used and protected. Beginners sometimes imagine this means one central team controls everything, but that is rarely practical. In most organizations, accountability is shared across business leaders, operational managers, technical teams, and governance functions. What matters is that the roles are clear enough to support real decisions. If a critical report contains conflicting values, someone should be able to determine which owner must resolve the issue. If a new system introduces a change to customer data, someone should have authority to review how that change affects definitions, quality, retention, and downstream use. Auditors examine accountability because vague ownership is one of the fastest ways for data problems to multiply without anyone feeling responsible for fixing them. It also helps to understand that governance should be driven by business needs rather than by abstract rulemaking. Data has value because it supports something the organization is trying to accomplish. That may include customer service, financial control, regulatory reporting, fraud detection, supply chain planning, medical treatment, academic records, or almost any other major function. ADGP becomes meaningful when it connects governance decisions to those real outcomes. For example, data quality standards should matter because incorrect information can cause billing errors, poor decisions, customer harm, or compliance failures. Retention rules should matter because the organization needs to preserve useful records while also limiting unnecessary storage and exposure. Access controls should matter because too much access weakens protection, while too little access can disrupt legitimate work. An auditor evaluating a DGP therefore looks for evidence that governance is tied to operational and strategic needs. A program built only around formal documentation, without visible business relevance, often becomes weak over time because people stop seeing why the rules matter in the first place. Policies, standards, and procedures are a visible part of the DGP, but they should be understood as tools rather than the whole program. Policies usually express the organization's overall expectations about how data should be governed, protected, and used. Standards provide more specific rules, such as how important data elements should be named, classified, validated, or retained. Procedures describe how staff are expected to carry out those requirements in daily work. Auditors review these documents because they show whether the organization has translated broad intentions into repeatable guidance. Still, the mere existence of documents is not enough. A well-written policy that nobody follows is not evidence of effective governance. Strong evaluation looks for alignment between documentation and actual practice. If a standard says critical data must have defined owners, the auditor expects to see those owners identified. If procedures require review of data changes, the auditor expects to find evidence that those reviews occur. Governance becomes real when written expectations shape actual behavior instead of sitting untouched in a shared folder. Data quality is one of the most important areas within any DGP because poor quality data can damage the organization even when the systems themselves are running normally. When people hear data quality, they often think only of accuracy, but the idea is broader. Quality may also involve completeness, consistency, timeliness, validity, and relevance for the intended use. A customer address that is spelled correctly but outdated may still be poor quality for delivery purposes. A financial code entered in the wrong format may still be readable to a person but useless for automated reporting. Good governance helps the organization decide what quality means for different kinds of data and what controls are needed to maintain that quality. Auditors look for whether quality standards are defined, whether exceptions are identified, whether recurring issues are analyzed, and whether management understands which data matters most. A mature DGP does not assume every field deserves the same level of attention. It focuses effort where poor data would cause the greatest harm, confusion, or operational disruption. Definitions and shared meaning are another major part of governance, even though they can seem less exciting than security or reporting. Many organizations struggle because different teams use the same words to mean different things, or different words to mean the same thing. Revenue, active customer, terminated employee, completed order, and other common terms can create serious confusion if they are not defined consistently enough for enterprise use. A DGP should help establish common definitions for critical data elements and make those definitions available to the people who rely on them. This does not mean every department loses all flexibility, but it does mean that enterprise reporting and important decisions should not be built on silent disagreements about meaning. Auditors evaluate this area because inconsistent definitions create errors that are difficult to detect just by looking at a report. The numbers may all add up correctly within each system, yet still conflict across the organization. Strong governance reduces this risk by creating shared language, controlled changes, and better visibility into how key data is interpreted and used. Access and protection are closely connected to the DGP because data governance is not only about making information useful. It is also about making sure information is used appropriately and protected according to its sensitivity and purpose. Some data should be widely available because broad access helps the organization operate efficiently. Other data should be restricted because it contains financial details, personal information, intellectual property, legal records, or other sensitive content. Governance helps determine which is which. It defines who should have access, under what conditions, for what reasons, and with what review. Auditors study this area because data exposure is often caused not by dramatic technical failure, but by weak governance around classification, access approval, or ongoing review. If the organization has not clearly identified sensitive data or aligned access with business need, then controls become inconsistent and difficult to defend. A strong DGP supports protection by making sensitivity visible, ownership clear, and expectations understandable across technical and business teams alike. Data lifecycle management also sits near the heart of governance. Data does not remain equally useful or equally risky forever. Some information is created for immediate operational use and later becomes reference material. Some data must be retained for legal, audit, or business reasons. Some should be archived, and some should be deleted when it is no longer needed. If the organization keeps everything forever, it increases storage burden, search difficulty, and exposure if data is later misused or compromised. If it disposes of information too early, it may lose evidence, history, or records required for compliance or operational continuity. A DGP should therefore include guidance about creation, use, storage, retention, archival, and disposal. Auditors evaluate whether the organization has defined those expectations and whether they are practical enough to be followed. This area often reveals the difference between formal intention and operational reality. Many organizations claim to manage data over its life cycle, but when asked how long certain records are retained or why old data remains accessible, the actual answers may be far less disciplined. Another important part of evaluation involves data movement and integration. In most organizations, data does not stay in one place. It moves between applications, reports, interfaces, file transfers, shared platforms, and manual processes. Each movement creates an opportunity for error, duplication, delay, or misunderstanding. A DGP should help the organization understand where important data originates, where it flows, how it changes along the way, and which systems are considered trusted sources for key information. This is important because leadership decisions often depend on data that has already passed through several hands or systems before it appears in a dashboard or report. Auditors look for whether the organization has enough visibility into these flows to govern them effectively. If the business cannot explain where a key metric comes from, who transforms it, or how exceptions are handled, then confidence in the result should be limited. Good governance improves traceability and reduces the risk that important information becomes detached from its source, its meaning, or its controls as it moves through the environment. Change management is another area where a DGP is tested. Data environments are not static. New applications are introduced, business rules are updated, reporting needs expand, mergers occur, regulations change, and teams adjust the way they capture or process information. Each of these changes can affect definitions, quality, access, retention, and downstream dependencies. A strong DGP does not treat data governance as something established once and left alone. Instead, it provides a way to evaluate the effect of change before confusion spreads. Auditors therefore want to know whether important data changes are reviewed, whether data owners are involved when systems affecting key information are modified, and whether downstream users are considered before changes are implemented. In weaker environments, system changes are often approved primarily for functional reasons, while data consequences are noticed only later when reports stop matching or quality complaints begin to rise. Governance adds discipline by making sure that data effects are part of the decision, not an afterthought discovered through operational pain. Measurement and oversight are also essential because the organization needs some way to know whether the DGP is actually working. Good governance programs often use a mix of indicators, reviews, issue tracking, and governance meetings to understand where data quality problems exist, where ownership is unclear, where access exceptions are accumulating, or where policy requirements are not being followed. The purpose of measurement is not to generate decorative dashboards. It is to help leadership and data owners see whether the program is improving trust and control or whether old problems are simply being renamed and carried forward. Auditors examine whether the organization monitors meaningful aspects of governance and whether action follows when issues are identified. A DGP that collects issue logs but never resolves root causes is not very mature. A program that measures only easy things, such as the number of documents published, may also miss the real point. Strong oversight focuses on whether critical data is governed in a way that improves reliability, protection, and consistency where the business most depends on it. Common weaknesses in this area are often easier to recognize than the ideal state, and they help beginners understand what auditors notice. One common problem is treating data governance as solely an IT responsibility, even though many important decisions about meaning, ownership, quality, and use belong with the business. Another is creating governance committees and documents without giving them enough authority to influence projects and operations. Some organizations also struggle because they attempt to govern everything at once, which leads to complexity and fatigue, while others fail because they never prioritize their most critical data at all. Weak programs often show inconsistent definitions, poor quality reporting, unresolved ownership disputes, informal data sharing, and sensitivity rules that are unclear or unevenly applied. None of these problems exist in isolation. They usually reinforce one another, creating an environment where people no longer fully trust enterprise data and fall back on local files, private spreadsheets, or personal interpretations. That loss of trust is one of the clearest signs that the DGP needs stronger design, sponsorship, or execution. From an audit perspective, evaluating a DGP means gathering evidence that governance exists in practice, not just in intention. The auditor may review policies, standards, ownership assignments, quality reports, issue logs, classification guidance, retention rules, access review practices, meeting records, change documentation, and examples of how data decisions are made across important business areas. Interviews are also valuable because they reveal whether staff understand who owns key data, what important terms mean, and how issues should be escalated or resolved. A mature program usually shows clear accountability, meaningful prioritization, practical controls around quality and protection, and evidence that governance decisions influence daily operations and major changes. A weak program usually shows fragmented ownership, competing definitions, inconsistent handling of sensitive data, and a gap between written expectations and actual behavior. The auditor is not looking for perfection in every field or every system. The real question is whether the organization manages data as a governed business asset rather than as a scattered collection of records left to chance. As we close, the big idea to carry forward is that evaluating a data governance program is really about asking whether the organization can trust, protect, understand, and manage its data well enough to support responsible decisions and reliable operations. ADGP is not just a paperwork exercise and not just a technical discipline. It sits at the intersection of business meaning, accountability, protection, quality, and lifecycle control. When governance is strong, leaders can act with more confidence, teams can work with fewer disputes, sensitive information can be handled more responsibly, and the business is better positioned to meet both operational and regulatory expectations. When governance is weak, the organization may still produce reports and keep systems running. But underneath that surface, there is often confusion, duplication, preventable exposure, and growing distrust in the very information people rely on. For a new learner, that is the key lesson worth remembering. Data becomes far more valuable when it is governed deliberately, and far more dangerous when it is not.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.